Welcome to this, my second video on sailboat engine maintenance. In the previous video we talked about cooling systems and how to maintain those. This time we're going to be talking about one of the other systems, and that's the lubrication system. So just to recap what we said last time, and that is that an engine really has three primary systems within it. The fuel system, the cooling system, and the lubricating system. Okay, so these three systems are basically what means the engine runs smoothly and efficiently all the time. And we have to maintain all of these to maintain a healthy, reliable engine. So the last video we talked about cooling, and in this video we're going to be talking about lubrication and how to maintain a lubricating system on an engine. So the lubricating system is as important as fuel and as important as cooling, if not maybe most important. The lubrication system provides oil around the engine that reduces friction within the moving parts. So there's lots of moving parts within an engine, as you can appreciate, and there are little oil ways going all over the engine to provide oil to those parts. And indeed that is actually pressurized within those parts, and that's why we have an oil pressure light that indicates that the pressure is low. Okay, and low pressure might be down to a number of things, but we'll come on to some fault finding maybe later. So the lubricating system on our engine is the bloodline to the engine, the blood of the engine, effectively. So let's talk a little bit about what are the key components of the lubricating system on an engine. Okay, so I guess we all know an engine, okay, and at the bottom of the engine is a sump, and into that there's a small pipe, okay, and that picks up oil from within the sump. Okay, on that we have a little pump, okay, and that pump is what drives the oil around the engine. From the pump we go to a filter, okay, and that filter removes contaminants and large particles from the oil system, and after that the oil is pumped to the components in the engine that require lubricating. Within this line there is normally an oil pressure switch, and that oil pressure switch detects that there's pressure between the oil filter and the moving parts. Okay, that's really important. So and that oil pressure will light on the dashboard to indicate that there is no oil pressure or insufficient oil pressure. So when you first start the engine, the oil light comes up, and then once the engine is running, this pump is driven straight from the engine, and that pressurizes the system and then turns the oil pressure switch off. So really only a few things that we can do to maintain the system. Okay, one is change the oil, and we should be doing that, and the second one is to change the filter. If you do those two things, the rest of the system is really reliable and will run for many tens of years, as long as it's well maintained. So, the maintenance we need to do is change the oil and change the filter. So how often do we need to change the oil and filter? Well, that depends on your manufacturer of your engine, and they will give you some recommendations as to how frequently the oil should be changed. And the other important thing is to note is the type of oil that you should be using. Okay, so frequency of oil change is very much dictated by the manufacturer. You should read your operator's manual, and that will tell you how often you need to change your oil. It will also tell you how much oil you need and the type of oil. So that's the go-to place for that information. So here's a little extract from my manual, and as you can see, it's specifying oil dependent on the ambient temperature. So what it's saying is we need a multi-grade oil, and that's what these two numbers mean. It means it's a multi-grade. And I'm going to pick the one that most suits the normal operating environment here in Sydney, Australia. So we get cool, but we don't get below 0 degrees, at least down here by the coast. Further inland, they have some lower temperatures. But here in Sydney, so our normal environment is the 0 to 30 degrees centigrade range. So that means I need an SAE 1540. So that means it's a multigrade, and what a multigrade is it kind of has two states, two levels of viscosity. Okay, it has a winter and a normal operating range. So the winter range is dictated by this W, so it's a 15W winter. And what that means is it has a certain viscosity that's appropriate for winter conditions. Okay, but once the engine gets up to temperature, we then get the 40, and that's at 100 degrees C. Okay, so all of these numbers is a measurement of viscosity of the oil, either at winter temperatures or at the normal operating temperature for the engine. And that's what a multigrade is. It has effectively, it changes its viscosity as the engine warms up, and winter and summer. So here in Sydney, the manual's requiring me to have a 1540, and that's what I've purchased. I also need to have 6 litres of it, so I've purchased 6 litres of multigrade oil, and here it is. So this is an Australian brand, and is specifically designed for marine diesel engines. It has some additional additives that protect the engine from the salty environment that is normal for a marine engine. So nice and easy. I'm a big believer in you get what you pay for. So there are cheaper oils out there that have this same 1540 because they can meet the same requirements, but the additives etc. won't be potentially be as good. So you pay your money, you take your choice. Personally, I've gone with this this brand, and it's a 1540 as is required by my engine. So the other thing that we need, back to the diagram of course, is that filter. On my engine it's a spin-on oil filter. Here it is. Now again, there are many different types of oil filter. Your manual for your engine will tell you which type of filter you require. So again, I guess all the information you need is in your manual for your engine. So that's it, really. Again, just to recap, The oil system's made up of lots of components really, but there's only two components that we can do anything about as a DIY, and that is changing the oil filter and changing the actual oil, okay, and checking the oil and the oil level. So but for changing of components, it's literally oil and filter done. Really important we do it. If we don't do it, those little oil ways, little oil passages will get blocked in our engine, and that will cause premature failure of the engine, early wear of the engine, and premature failure of the engine. So let's now go to the boat and go and see how that maintenance is done. Okay, so back at the boat now, and we're ready to do the oil change. We've got the oil and the filter, as we previously discussed. While we're here, we're going to change the oil on the gearbox as well. For this engine, it just uses a automatic transmission fluid, but you'll need to check your engine manual or your gearbox manual for the correct oil for your particular engine. Along with these things, I have some empty bottles to take the waste oil from the engine. The output and just pumping it out. I've warmed the engine up. It's not boiling hot, but it is a comfy temperature to work with, so the oil will flow a lot easier with a warm engine. So let's get down here and pump the oil out. Okay, to pump it out, I'm just going to turn this cock on here. Remove this bung, put a rag underneath to catch any drips. I'm going to put this under here, catch the oil, and it's simply a case of pumping it out. Okay, stop there. So that's the last oil out of the sump. Okay, so that's the oil out now. Now we have to replace that bung on the pump and turn the cock off at the bottom of the pump, and the next job will be to change the oil filter. Okay, so we're at the front of the engine now. We're going to change the oil filter. This is the oil filter here. It's nice and easy to get to on this engine. Your engine might not be as easy, but it's easy to find because it'll be bolted straight onto the side of the engine rather than remote. So this will be on hand tight. So with a bit of luck, we'll be able to just unscrew this off. What I normally do is put a plastic bag over the oil filter, so I can drop the waste oil and waste filter that it'll contain straight into the bag, and that tries to limit the amount of mess that we make here in the engine bay. So let's get on with that. Okay. Okay, so we're ready to replace the oil filter now. First thing we need to do, of course, is take it out of the box, and there's a rubber seal here at the bottom of the oil filter. Just a little bit of oil, fresh oil, out from the new oil container, and just a slight smear on here. That will help the oil filter seat, and it's simply a case of threading it back on the place where it came off of. Okay, so we just screwed the filter onto the side of the engine, just snug and tight. There's no reason to use a filter wrench to tighten them up. You might need one to undo it, but if you're doing a regular oil change, you should be able to spin these off in the same way that we've spun them on. Anyway, there we go. So we've taken the oil out, and we've now changed the oil filter, and now it's just a case of filling the engine up with fresh engine oil. I'll do it all from here. Okay, so we're at the top of the engine now to fill it up. Nicely labelled oil filler on the rocker cover. So just a case of removing that and using a funnel, save making a mess. Just fill the engine with the required amount of clean oil. Okay, so that's the oil into the engine. Now the last thing to do is just check that there's the right amount in. I'm just going to take the dipstick out, give it a wipe, and check that we are between the minimum and maximum. You probably won't be able to see that on the camera, but I can see that we are. When the engine's run, I'll check it again and just make sure that everything is okay and there's no airlocks or anything in the oil. So just check it again after about 10 minutes worth of running, and another 5 minutes to allow the oil to drain back into the sump. Okay, so that's the engine oil changed. I'm not going to be able to change the gearbox oil because I haven't brought the right spanner with me, so I'll cover that in a future video. Just to recap, it's a really easy job to change the oil. Simply a case of pumping the old oil out in this case, or maybe with a sump drain in your case. Replacing the oil filter, which typically aren't that tight, so you don't need particular strength to do that, and pouring fresh oil in the top. So you can see the condition of the oil that's come out compared with what was going in. This is much darker. That's the particles and the contaminants within the oil, and that's why it's really important to change this lifeblood of the engine to reduce the amount of friction. So I hope you found that video useful, and if you have, please give me a thumbs up or a subscribe, and catch you on a future video.